started. So tonight we've got Dan and Dave and Blunty. Alex won't be joining us this evening. I believe he's doing his school thing, which is a good thing for him. We do want him to pursue that, but I do have a couple articles that we'll cover, and then a couple things that we're working on to kind of move forward with some of the stuff that's coming up. So first off, I've got Dan. We'll go ahead and start with the DJI remote ID mandate. So our first article comes from SUAS News. This is something we saw, I think, last week, if not the week prior. But DJI has submitted several of their latest models for remote ID approval and has gotten that approval. They've submitted their Mini 3 Pro, the Avata, obviously that's their newest one, the Air 2S, the Mavic 3, the Mavic 3 Cine, the M30 and the M30T. Newly manufactured versions. Go ahead.
We're getting double voice, or I'm getting double voice, I think.
I wonder. Hang on.
Oh, never mind. I had the stream up. Go ahead.
Fair enough. All right. So newly manufactured versions of these drones will comply with remote ID with no further action required, but customers who already own those drones will be able to comply with remote ID rules by downloading a free firmware update at a later date. DJI is seeking FAA approval for additional drone models, which will be posted on the FAA website as they are approved. So the models with the remote ID functionality. Take care of that real quick. Let's see. Models with the remote ID functionality include the notation ASTM F341122A RIDB on the regulatory label attached to the drone. So the ASTM standard is the standard that was created by the ASTM working group. I think that was about 150 people working together for about 3 years to create that. And I believe some work is still being done on that. Correct, Dave?
Just trying to come off mute. Yes, and there's the second standard, 3586. Am I getting that right? Is the sum of the 3411 plus the second one make up the compliance. So it's interesting that DJI chose the older standard to label their document or their drone. And yeah, there's a little bit of work that is addressing the conditions that the FAA added to the approval of the means of compliance.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we'll wrap that up tomorrow.
Yep. That'd be great. And then they do mention in this article, which we know to be true at this point, that the FAA has pushed back the enforcement date of standard remote ID for manufacturers until December 16th. So they've given folks a couple more months to get their standard remote ID solution squared away, submitted, and approved. So
as long as they're showing some progress towards that goal, or whatever that stated.
Right. So definitely an interesting turn of events. We predicted that this would get pushed back a little bit, and luckily it has, to allow some folks to move forward. So good deal there.
So on the listing for the Avata, do they list like specific serial numbers that are compliant, or everything will be compliant at a future date with the firmware update?
So it's saying that newly manufactured versions will comply with remote ID with no further action. Existing ones that are in the wild is a free firmware update later on.
So basically they're saying if they're manufactured after the deadline, they'll come with firmware that meets the rules. But if they were manufactured before the deadline, you need to update the firmware.
Yeah, and I imagine that DJI is going to push this all the way to December to ensure that firmware is going to be stable and whatnot. So, but yeah, no, I mean that's definitely a good question. So, all right, any questions, concerns, comments on that one?
I'm a little curious right now if anybody has Nevada, and if you fire up like the Open Drone ID app on your phone, does it detect anything, or is there no remote ID broadcast whatsoever right now?
As far as I know, it's broadcasting the same drone ID that all DJI drones do. The only thing that doesn't, that DJI runs, is the air units and the Vistas.
Yeah, the
and we don't know if the
FPV
new air
system.
unit will.
Sure.
Yeah, but as far as I know, both the old Potato, and the new Avata, both broadcast like DJI's drone ID. I don't think they're broadcasting like extra data. Like I don't think it's generating a session ID that's different unless they are already compliantly doing that under like the drone ID that DJI already does for Aeroscope. But I know they're already broadcasting that. So,
Right.
And then they also just pushed an update to the app that adds the Japanese remote ID, and they already had French remote ID like in the apps that automatically like can be enabled basically if you turn on the settings and do an update. So I imagine that it's like basically like that, where like they'll roll that update out into the app, and then that'll turn it on, if you enable it. Like if you do the update and you're in the region, probably, I imagine, because that's the requirement, right? That's a good question or something to consider, right? Will it automatically turn on if you do the update in your FCC, or will it, because FCC could be Canada, right? And that wouldn't have the requirement, so.
Maybe you're.
I would suggest that it would automatically turn on because one of the requirements of the rule is that you cannot turn it off. So if it's going
So it would
to
do
be
it based on
compliant,
geolocation, do you think?
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose it could use its own GPS when it boots up and turn it on. It could enable it through if you're doing the update from your cell phone and your cell phone knows where you're at. Yeah, I guess there's lots of options for DJI there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
as XJet's mentioning in the chat, in the future that means you can't fly the Avata without your phone because it sounds like it's getting your location of the transmitter station from your attached phone that's connected to the system.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
I thought the headset had a GPS in it.
I don't know that that's been confirmed.
Okay.
I don't think it does. Maybe it does.
No GPS, but it does have a Bluetooth transmitter.
According to XJet, it says DJI says you need your phone to be connected to be remote ID compliant.
There you go.
Well, there we go. That works. So, yeah, that'll definitely be interesting to see how that rolls out and what the firmware entails and whatnot. So,
wonder how many people will get upset because they've updated the firmware. Now they can't fly anymore. Maybe they can't run the app on their phone because they don't have a compliant or a compatible phone. That'll be, yeah. I'm sure there'll be a few unhappy people out there from that.
Yep. Well, the other thing to ask here is like, maybe, I don't know, but DJI already like lets you quote unquote unlock your drone. Like, will that same thing be happening? There would be like a website you can go to that they don't know about that you can just unlock the drone and they don't patch it so that's conveniently okay for them. You know what I mean? Because they don't control that hack. Like that's the difference, right? They just like allow it or don't allow it by patching or not patching it.
Well, presumably to be compliant with standard remote ID, there needs to be a level of tamper resistance to move forward. So it'll be interesting to see if that still applies and if it's unless it just bricks the drone. I mean,
yeah, right now even on at least in the goggles we can write to the RTOS and the firmware, like basically the entire goggle architecture, at least the V1 and V2 you can write to. You can't like save the write to the RTOS, but you can write every time it boots. So I wonder like what that'll be, like from the other side. If the operator disables it, right? It's not on DJI, which is kind of like
no, that definitely is going to fall on the operator for sure.
Yeah.
That's FPV WTF. That hack.
Yeah, that's the root hack. That's the current root hack. Yeah. But there's also drone hacks, which does all the drone stuff, which I imagine would be the drone side of things. But it'll just be interesting because right now you can like NFC unlock and FCC unlock through a hack you like pay for and then flash with the website, and they have stopped it in some cases, but there's also some cases where, if you don't update fast enough and you do the hack beforehand or you wait long enough, then they'll just hack the new version. It's not on DJI to do that. And I don't know. It's weird. Also, like they have where you can do a text file to override the FCC power levels, right? And that's something they put in the firmware. right? So that seems like more obviously something they couldn't do for like an override for something else, right? Like, but that's where the gray area lands, I think, right? Because like, who put what in where, and like what actually controls it, and like who told them, and like is it all on the operator to still do that, and like, you know, because the FCC lets you sell whatever as long as the operator has to unlock it, right? So would it be the same thing with this?
Not so fast.
Well, kind.
The FCC has accountability at the manufacturer, the retailer, and the operator for VTX transmission. So,
but it's about marketing, isn't it?
No, it's distribution and operation.
I understand it was distribution based on marketing. Like all the stuff that they're getting fined, like Hobby King is getting fined for, is all marketing, isn't it? Like a lot of the lawsuit is marketing. Because they didn't market it to ham operators, right? That was the whole thing, or like a big part of it.
I don't think so. I believe it was that they were transmitting in two frequencies that were. One was a navigation frequency, and the other was an ambulance frequency, and that was like, no, those were the violations. But then, of course, the FCC also has a restriction for those frequencies to not operate over 1 watt. So I think that's I would stay, personally, I am radio operator, I have my general license, and for those frequencies we are all restricted to 1 watt max. So I will not transmit more than 1 watt.
Gotcha.
But that's me. I know. I mean,
it's just all that stuff is super confusing. Like Lexi points out in the chat, like isn't that telecommand? Like I know they specifically lay out telecommand versus other broadcast, right? So video is different than control link. I remember reading about that. But then you have to like dig through the laws with how that works, right? Because then there's also like you're supposed to broadcast your ID, right? And then but they said if that's in the LSD, that's okay. Like there's all these like layers of it, right? And I don't know how to piece it out.
But and it is it's of the post is correct that you do not have to broadcast your call signal every 10 minutes if you are controlling a remote vehicle. However, the frequencies that we operate in are absolutely limited to 1 watt.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'd be also curious to see once the Avata has firmware that enforces remote ID, how they're implementing that rule that we found where you should be able to fly indoors without a GPS lock, because you can pass the pre-flight checklist even though you don't have accurate GPS, because that isn't considered a failure of the remote ID system.
Yeah.
So like if the only thing you're getting from your phone is GPS, then why would you need your phone to be able to fly?
Understood. And I think we're on a point of intent versus a probably a loophole or an error in the mock. And so it's the same, but in terms of that the rule recognizes and the FAA approves a means of compliance, but of course the FAA has the authority to rescind that approval at any moment.
Good conversation. I wasn't expecting that level, but hey, that's definitely some good food for thought on some of that for sure. All right, so next article that we have, it comes from Drone Life. Cybersecurity for drones. AUVSI and Fortress Information are partnering to develop voluntary standards. So this would be something similar to like an ASTM, but more from a private organization. So they announced the launch of an industry-wide partnership concentrated on establishing an enterprise cybersecurity model and a set of voluntary standards meant to safeguard uncrewed systems and robotics against cyber risks. Leveraging Fortress' past experience in establishing voluntary risk-based standards, AVUSI will lead an effort to achieve a consensus, set standards, and promote cybersecurity policies and actions among uncrewed systems manufacturers and suppliers. Uncrewed vehicles are relied upon for national defense, public safety, commercial delivery, and critical infrastructure inspection, and more. These technologies are increasingly part of an economic foundation for nations across the globe. That came from AVUC's Executive VP of Government and Public Affairs, Michael Robbins. A cybersecure foundation built on universal industry standards among industry stakeholders and suppliers will help ensure the economic and operational potential of uncrewed vehicles is reached. They did a survey of 900, a little over 900 Americans conducted last week by Fortress and AVUC. Found a majority of U.S. consumers believe that cyber attacks on uncrewed vehicles would be a big deal. And that's in air quotes. Though most believe an attack should not prevent the vehicle from being used. So the survey results, some of the interesting ones, 69% of respondents find it important that the uncrewed vehicle industry coordinate and share cybersecurity data. 76% believe a cyber attack on uncrewed military vehicles would be a big deal. But should not, and then 65% don't think that an attack should suspend their use. So definitely some interesting stuff. 38% and 29% expect to see self-driving cars and self-driving fleet vehicles, respectively, within 5 years. Obviously, that would be a cybersecurity risk there. But definitely interesting to see AVUC get into basically creating an industry working group. And it's made up of experts from AVUC member organizations who will collaborate with Fortress on the development of a cybersecurity framework, which they intend to complete in under a year. So that'll be interesting to see how it pulls out.
What does any of this mean? I am like that is the most jargony bullshit, like 2 paragraphs I've ever heard in my life. Like, what does any of this mean? Like, I don't understand what enterprise cybersecurity model is a set of voluntary standards meant to safeguard uncrewed systems. Like, so we're doing internet shit to make sure it's more secure? Like, is that really all that we're talking about here? Like, is there any substance in the conversation?
Well,
like,
I think what they're looking to do is basically create a cybersecurity or a cyber attack adverse kind of framework that people can apply to their systems to decrease the risk of vulnerability, essentially. So I mean, we all know that things like spoofing and whatnot exists in terms of I would say from a counter UAS standpoint, the ability to spoof a radio signal, take over control of a aircraft or a vehicle, that kind of stuff, is a potential. But I think this is really looking to harden those systems against that kind of risk, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Gotcha.
So
they're trying to build. Like we talked about, you mentioned ASTM. They're like ASTM, but like, is the idea that instead of like I don't know, like ASTM builds remote ID standards with the technologies to broadcast remote ID. Are we saying this is like basically a layer to say like, here's what people would do if you need to be cyber secure in your UAS or counter UAS stuff, and then people will adopt that similar to the ASTM? Is that the idea?
I think that's what the idea is that they're creating a group to create a set of standards to, harden those types of systems, those unmanned vehicle systems. And I don't think they're restricting it specifically to drones. I think they're focused on all types of unmanned systems, whether that be driverless vehicles, it could be drone delivery, it could be stuff that they use to scout the seafloor. I mean, think of anything that would be a pretty big deal, and being able to harden that against any kind of attack. And so I mean, everybody's a little paranoid these days. So I think it's just taking that step to create a standard that they can suggest to people to create that layered protection, essentially.
Gotcha.
I'm back.
I don't think a VUC story is a story, just a press release. Yeah, I mean, it is. But at the same time, it's interesting, food for thought, right? In terms of protecting assets. So
I apologize. I had to sign back in. So if this is redundant, my apologies. I wanted to comment that this is unusual and I think something new that AUVSI is authoring a standard. It's a big endeavor, and they'll be competing with international standards bodies. Okay, that's one. It's a it is effectively creating a product, and it's not easy. So that's newsworthy. The second is that there is a counter UAS ARC Aviation Rulemaking Committee being started, and so it's an interesting timing that.
Yeah.
Dan, can you hear me?
We heard
Yep.
most of that, but I missed a couple of words at the end.
Oh, good. I thought I froze again. So no, it's interesting. It's interesting timing from AUVSI's perspective that right in time for an ARC, they're kicking off a standards effort, and so it feels like a coalition to present to the ARC, or at least work within the ARC as it gets going. So we will try to volunteer. We will volunteer. We'll see if we're successful in participating in the counter UAS aviation rulemaking committee.
So the paranoid take on this is they're going to make a big committee to make sure that they have places to have backdoors so they can have counter UAS on all of our drones, right? Like that's the paranoid take, right? Because like if you're like, because I'm thinking about if you're creating a standards for cybersecurity, you're trying to protect against the attacks that the counter UAS ARC is like developing, right? Like if
I
you're
just look at it as more of a mercenary view, and if you're helping develop a standard, your time to market's better than someone else's. And so if you're successful in a ubiquitous standard, you cut out competition, and you do it for the good of the community. And so it's.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
I mean that's that's a little paranoid, but I mean when you have if you can get fantastic market share, for example, DJI could set standards in as videographer drones, but I don't think they would, given their the current political climate right now of China versus the rest of the world. But AUVSI coming in as a U.S. association, and there are drone responders is international, and a lot of the concerns are. But AUVSI is located in D.C. and they have a lot of excellent contacts in the various three-letter security agencies. So lucrative contracts to follow.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would imagine so.
Yeah.
All right, so I do have a couple drones for good. We always like to highlight some of those. So this isn't the first company, I don't believe, that started doing this. I believe a lot of this has been going on worldwide, but there's a Seattle drone startup replanting forests after wildfire utilizing drones. So a swarm of giant drones navigates a scorched moonscape, tracing the rugged topography. The scene has a desolate sci-fi vibe, but it's really rooted in terra firma. The devices belong to Drone Seed, a Seattle startup deploying technology to help restore some of the millions of acres of forest that have burned in wildfires across the U.S. and beyond. The conflagrations include fires so intense that they don't leave any live trees to provide new seeds or seeds in the soil, and so massive that they create barren islands from seed sources. And left alone, the burns can sit as treeless grass or shrubland for years, not to mention erosion and that kind of stuff. So utilizing drones, the company can quickly disperse seeds in an area with fragile soils and no roads. They have reseeded thousands of acres since 2019. Drone Seed is scaling its efforts up, scrambling to meet demand. They landed $36 million in new venture capital last year. So let's see, we're out trying to seed hope, they said. The idea of scattering seeds by air isn't new, but Drone Seed was the first company to secure FAA approval to use so-called heavy lift drones for its targeted seed delivery. The startup, which launched in 2016, uses technology at every step of the reforestation process, from pine cone collecting to monitoring reseeded acres. So pretty cool. Definitely a drones for good kind of story. It's good to see the different uses of drones, not only with what we do as a hobby, but what's available moving into doing it for a living and doing things that can help the rest of the world. So good on them for doing that kind of stuff. The next one I have is an interesting one. So this actually isn't out of America. This is out of, I believe, England. She has used her drone to locate over 200 lost dogs for her neighbors. She does it free of charge. Let's see. Erica Hart, let's see, the 33-year-old rushed to the last known location after receiving a call and within 20 minutes spied the escaped pooch running down a residential road. When the 2-year-old dog darted into a nearby field and kept moving, Erica was able to direct Jamie and his wife to the best spot for intercepting her. Let's see. What she did is brilliant. She's a hero, a real superhero. Erica was in constant communication with us. She knew what she was doing and where to look. Said Leah, who had no idea how the dog escaped their fenced yard, but thought it must have been spooked by thunder. She doesn't charge. The humble drone operator believes she's rescued more than 200 dogs in 7 years and has started a Facebook group where users share lost dog posts, and Erica shares the happy endings. She doesn't charge any money for the service. It just says she does it purely for the love of dogs, even if it means spending money on fuel for her car instead of treating herself. So definitely pretty cool.
Wow, that is pretty cool. I've actually found a handful of pets in the past few years near me, but I have never thought of using the drone to try to track them down.
Right.
But most of the areas that we've helped find some lost pets have been very covered with trees. So it'd be really hard to find them with a drone.
Yeah, definitely in those forested areas it'd be difficult, but in a neighborhood, definitely makes a whole lot of sense. So.
Yeah, we've covered a bunch of those stories on the news. It's crazy how many are found. I'll post another link in the chat here. Drone SAR UK is a like a collaboration of like a bunch of people who get together and find lost dogs in the UK with drones. It's like their whole thing. They do it for no money, and they have like 42,000 people in a group that like all help find lost dogs if you lose your dog in the UK. Yeah,
that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, drones for search and rescue. I mean, whether it's for a dog or whether it's humans or some of the experiences Dave and I had for lost mammals out in the middle of a farm field during the middle of Flight Fest. I mean, it's super fun. It's awesome. It's cool being able to do that kind of stuff, and I mean, definitely helping folks is a reward in and of itself. So really neat. All right.
I had another article when you're.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I've got this in the chat. Dan, if you can pick that up, if you will display it.
Sure.
Our friends at Aloft and the CEO of Aloft, John Hagrains, announces a new product. And one of the great things about this, so Aloft is the software developer behind Before You Fly, and they also have their own enhanced capabilities within Aloft. They have a new platform that they've been developing, and if you scroll down where it's a nice column where it says features available, just a little more. There you go. See, free. So John has been committed to provide landscape abilities for free, and we are ever so grateful. So this helps not only recreational but Part 107 pilots, and the product is very effective, and we really appreciate that this is a company that really supports FPV and recreational use. And,
especially that Lance part on the checklist.
Absolutely. Yeah, full disclosure, John is a board member of Drone Safety Team. I'm now a member of Drone Safety Team. So we do work together, but there's no financial affiliation between aloft than FPVFC.
And weather check so I can know when there's a tornado so I can go out and fly purposefully when the weather's really bad. That's the only reason I would use the weather check, is to know when I should fly when it's bad.
Now, I just glanced at this, but Dan, this looked to me like this is a new platform or a new app. So it appears that we'd download this and then sign in with our existing Aloft account. If I think I have that correct.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to fully read the email they sent, or why. And this part that's on screen right now is actually saying why the new app. So I haven't read all of that to figure out exactly why do they have a new app instead. Why did they not just update the old one?
Right. But
yeah, we haven't had much time. This just came out this afternoon, didn't it?
Popped out today, yeah. 21 September from John. Yeah. And let's see, I just verbally an update on had a real interesting discussion with about 20 FAA folks. So as part of when we're working on an AAAC, Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee, formerly DAC, one of those tasking groups frequently will ask the FAA a question for clarification, and we'll get a good answer. But it's usually an email traffic back and forth, and it's also filtered because they have to be careful what they provide to a FACA. So you can bet that a lawyer is reviewing the response, etc. So we had about 20 FAA folks on the phone answering a series of questions that we had associated with Tasking Group 13. And what's encouraging about it is that they had the FAA folks on live talking to those of us in the tasking group, and they also had an attorney on to jump in case some FAA member went over the line, so committed something that they couldn't, talked about a rule that was, if you'll forgive the pun, in flight. So I mean, it was, and no one was stopped, but they have to take those precautions. But the openness and the dialogue was great. Jay Merkel, the executive director, UAS Integration Office, introduced the session, and then Abby Smith, the new deputy director, UAS Integration Office, and co-chair of the drone safety team, stayed through the entire event and was the senior exec on the FAA side. So a little more flexibility in working with us. So that was a real positive. So that we anticipate that that work will be presented on 20 October. The location of the AC meeting has now been set.
And we lost Dave.
Remember?
Oh, we've got audio back?
He's back.
No? Yes? Are you there, Dave?
Here, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We've lost your video, but keep going. We can hear you now.
And so the AC meeting is set for Arlington, Virginia on the 20th of October, 10 to 3, I believe is the time. They're the only people available or permitted to be there in person are AC members and or their and the designated staff. And so we'll be tying in electronically again. And of course, we do have an active application into the DAC.
So we have not been invited to be there by any of the official members?
Correct. I'm sure we could probably get an invitation, but yeah.
And I'll put a link in here, I think, to the AC and the next meeting. It says October 20th, and let's see, they do have some. Oh no, those are previous meetings. They don't have the ebook that goes with that meeting yet. They usually publish that like a few days ahead of time, so then we'll know the agenda and the slides they're going to use and all that stuff.
Yep. And that's all I had.
So one of the other things that we did find out more recently is that the FAA reauthorization is being worked on. So we're going to be reaching out to see if what we can work with them on kind of some ideas that we've had and some of our partners have had about some possible good things that we can add to the FAA Reauthorization Act. And for those who don't know, the FAA Reauthorization Act is basically the budget and the go dos from Congress that the FAA.
The mandate.
Yeah, the mandate essentially from Congress to the FAA on not only what they're doing for crewed aviation, but unmanned aerial vehicles and systems. So that's where we saw remote ID come out and so on and so forth. And there's some stuff that we're really looking for them to move forward with. One of those being CBOs and the like to move forward with being able to get FRIAs on the table for folks and what that's going to look like and so on and so forth. So one of the things we're going to be doing is obviously reaching out to the folks who in Congress who are going to be working on that, giving them our 2 cents, but keep a watch on the space, our website or here in Discord, Facebook, because we may be asking for some help from the community to kind of talk to their senators and Congress people to help us kind of make some of those influences and some of those changes going forward. So,
good point. Good. Thanks for bringing that up, Josh.
Yeah.
A key activity for us, and certainly the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act came out in October 2018, just in time for the fiscal budget. So this one we would anticipate to pass sometime early to middle of 2023, and of course it's a 5-year period. And I stepped in there and said mandate intentionally. This is not Congress asking if the FAA would please do this. This is Congress dictating to the FAA as one of the executive branch agencies. This is what you will get done. And
here's your budget, and here's how you're supposed to spend it.
That's right.
How does this kind of thing get drawn up? Like we're in reality. Like, is everybody sitting in a room pitching things that go into this? Or are people pitching drafts of this from some place? Are there different? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand.
From what I understand from the folks who have described it to me is there's staff that gains access to subject matter experts, and the core staff also has skills in writing a bill, and they identify a set of cohorts that they feel are of interest, and they'll reach out, and then also they are lobbied. So they'll receive input from individuals who are interested in providing input. So we know that this group of staffies reached out to academia for points and input. So that's a positive, and we adore the professor that they asked for input. So that's a real plus. And then they craft the legislation, then gets proposed to as a bill. We also learned that it is bicameral and bipartisan, which is pretty unusual. So both chambers of Congress are working on it, and they are not playing any games in the sense of being written by the Democrats, and it's Democratic House, so they're just going to get it done. It is bipartisan, so there is active participation from both parties, and that is being written jointly, or probably not jointly, but separately by Congress and by the Senate, which implies that that'll necessitate a conference where they will have to adjudicate the differences after a vote in each of the chambers. Just like a civics class, isn't this great?
So
awesome.
one thing that
Yeah.
would worry me is like around now or in the next few months, if there was a major news story about somebody doing something bad with a drone, it would instantly find its way into the next FAA Reauthorization Act because they're in that mindset, thinking about it, working on it right now, and it'll just get in there, and yeah, then we'll be in trouble.
It's like a performance review. The most important time for a performance review is the 5 days before your performance review.
Right.
That is a fact of human nature. Absolutely. Yeah. So let's hope we don't have any terrible terror attacks.
Nothing but the drones for
terrible
good news
accidents.
articles.
True
That's it.
story.
We're pushing drones for good. That's right.
Puppies and rescues and all the good things. Right?
That's
So-
right.
Question on this is like, is this similar to like the government budget, like where they shut down if they don't pass it, sort of thing? Like, or how does it work if they don't like get it through? Right.
I think
So
the FAA would be in real trouble if they didn't pass it. So it really has to
Yeah.
be passed.
I think that there are provisions that there are portions of the federal government that continue to operate, and the air traffic
Okay.
management is one of them that
Critical
continues to
infrastructure.
operate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Now they'll
So-
they have. Well, there was a furlough, and some of the FAA. So when they shut down the government for a couple of weeks, a number of the people in the the non-critical staff members, folks that we work with in the UAS integration office, were sent home, and that's very unpleasant. And I mean, they come back to work bitter, and it's very disruptive. I mean, it's like, wait a second, I'm here for a job, and now I'm going to be furloughed. Give me a break. So I can respect the bitterness. Good question.
But
So
historically, these things pass very unanimously. I think the last one passed 99-1, or
yeah, it was the 2018 in the Senate was 100-0. Exactly right.
100-0.
Yeah, and the House was similar. So there was
My reason for mentioning that is we've heard back and forth about we've talked about how we're not a fan of that thing I brought up. I can't even remember the name of it, but it got shot down, where they're trying to do drone bans.
Senate
Yeah.
73.
So my concern would be like, the Republicans or whoever tries to force some stuff onto the FAA Reauthorization Act that discusses that sort of thing, because that's kind of where the heads are at, right? So
An interesting point, because Senator Lee is one of the advocates of that type of states' rights over FAA preemption. Yet, and he's been bringing it up year after year after year with not a lot of success. And it is of course, the bill has to go from the aviation subcommittee to the full House. So it would. I bet that it's more, unless you're on that committee, it probably is a little more difficult to inject language. Certainly, it's done all the time, but I bet that it's not encouraged.
sure. Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, you got to keep in mind the FAA is a government-created regulatory agency, right? So the FAA is not made up of elected officials. They're generally appointed / hired. But yes, senators, I would imagine, around the time of the writing of this, once it nears completion, everybody's going to want to put their 2 cents and their stamp on it, right? So they'll submit for amendments and whatnot through the process, and each one of those will get voted on in either up or down, added or not added kind of situation. So, it'll be interesting to, I think the hard part is that we don't know what's in it, so it's hard for us to say, but we can kind of give them our 2 cents as a somebody who wants to continue to be able to, for the hobby to thrive and be able to do what we do and innovate and break new horizons on technology, which has always been characteristic of this type of hobby. And
when the bill gets introduced, we'll see the content then. Then it's incumbent on us to move very fast.
Yeah.
Put together a utility. If so let's say there are 3 things we really don't like, then we'll put together a utility that identifies, okay, here's my zip code. All right, do I have a congressional representative or senator on one of the 2 aviation subcommittees? If yes, please submit this form. Click through and submit a form that says, please, vote, no on this part, or vote yes, or please support this change, this amendment to this bill. It's very important to us for the following reason.
Mm-hmm.
Puppies, STEM.
Puppies.
Yeah.
Puppies. That's awesome. All right. That's all I have, guys. I don't know. Dan, you got anything, or Blunty? This has been a great conversation. For sure.
Nope, I've got nothing. And none of the 3 of us are really into racing as far as I know. So without Alex here, we don't have an update on like multi-GP or anything, unless somebody else here has got any multi-GP updates for us.
No, I'm waiting patiently for my my fancy racing frame. I have all the components. I'm ready to go.
Oh, it's gonna be dangerous.
I don't know about that.
We're gonna get him in the senior circuit.
I'm pushing for that over 60.
There you go.
Class. I figure if they're only 1 or 2 people, I might have a shot.
You'll be in the top 3 for sure.
Exactly. Top 3 finisher.
There you go.
I can do that.
All right, guys. Well, I'll give you back the extra 9 minutes of your evening. Thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it. Do appreciate the comments and the questions. And this has been a great discussion over some interesting articles, some news, and hopefully we've clued you into kind of what we're working on and what's coming up in the regulatory space. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Either here on Discord, on our Facebook, or on our webpage. We've got some contact forms on there as well. So
if you want to keep the conversation going, keep posting in the chat, and people will do our best to answer.
Absolutely. So thank you, and y'all have a great night.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Goodbye.